Welcome to Reflection Cards. Today we are going to learn a new technique, creating reflections in two different ways. So to get started, we're going to make our card bases, and if you've got pre-cut card bases, we're just using the standard C6 size cards, so you can go ahead and use those. If not, cutting a piece of 12 by 12 cardstock, and as this is your base, any color will do. I've chosen to use white. So cutting it at 8 1/4 by 5 7/8, and then doing that again to create the second card, 8 1/4 by 5 7/8. So then you'll need to have a scoreboard if you like, and score at 4 1/8, or you could just fold in half and burnish that score. If using a thicker cardstock, I do recommend using your scoreboard because it just gives a neater finish to your card. So you can fold and burnish those cards and then set them aside, and we will adhere the front panel to them after we have inked them up. So once you have created your cards, or you have your cards ready to go, set them aside and grab your paper trimmer, because we'll need to create our front panels. So to do that, and to leave a small border around the panel when placed on the front of the card, we're just going to cut some white cardstock, and you want to use a smooth white for this technique. It gives a good inky finish. So we're going to cut that at 4 inches by 5 3/4, and just cutting 2 of those panels. So 4 inches by 5 3/4. Now, before we do our reflection techniques, we are going to need to ink up the cardstock to create our background. So I've used 3 colours of Distress Oxides. I've used Weathered Wood, Chip Sapphire, and Mermaid Lagoon, starting with the lightest colour first, and using a small brayer, just inking up one side of the brayer, so not the full brayer, just one side, inking off onto some scrap paper, and then starting on the edge and moving your way in to the cardstock. So on this first one, I didn't quite move in as much as I should have because I was still learning to do this technique. I haven't actually inked a card before this with a brayer. Whoops, it went too far. Just on the edge. So this is a really fun way of getting a beautiful blended background using a brayer. So just inking up that edge, rolling off on the scrap paper, and then starting from the outside edge and then rolling in. That way you get a nice shadow all the way around your cardstock. You'll see in the second card a bit later on that the technique gets a little bit better as I learn how to blend and ink up with the brayer. But it's a beautiful technique and a fun way to create a background of the card. So once you have finished doing that with your first colour, you move to your middle colour. Now you can use whatever colours you want. I chose to use blues for this first one. The second one, I ended up using a pink, a purple, and a yellow. So just have fun with it. Have a play with what colours might work and what you like, and what stamps you have, and what background what colours would work with the stamps that you are going to use. So keep inking it up in the same technique on all 3 colours, and then we will start working on our reflection. once you have finished inking up your background, you'll need a black dye ink. So I tried first using the Card Deco black dye ink. I did try StazOn, but that didn't work so well. It just made a beautiful stamp print on my brayer. So a dye ink works much better. We're going to ink up the stamp, and then using your brayer, roll over the stamp. So you want to put a good amount of pressure on there, but you want to make sure that that brayer is rolling rather than just pushing across. And then you'll see that that image is on your brayer, then lining it up onto your paper and rolling it off to create the reflection. And then inking up the stamp again and then stamping it. And you want to try and get it as close as you can to that reflection so they are touching. So lining it up takes a little bit, pressing down on that stamp to get a good solid image. And there we have our first reflection. So using the brayer, rolling that on and rolling that off onto our card. Now, it's a great technique with the brayer because we're trying to stamp with something that isn't symmetrical. The other two houses in the small dwelling set from Lavinia Stamps are pretty symmetrical. So to create the reflection with a symmetrical stamp is a little bit easier because what you'll do is ink up your stamp it on to your card, and then rotate your card, lining it up to touch at the bottom, and then stamping that second generation stamp underneath. And that creates your reflection. So it's a little bit lighter, but it just creates. I was in awe of this technique when I found it on the Lavinia Stamps YouTube channel. I think it was from about 6 years ago. And oh, goodness, I was so excited that it worked. I couldn't believe it. It just looked amazing. Such a fun technique. Again, with a symmetrical stamp, stamping that on, rotating it, and then stamping again. See my head in the frame there as I'm trying to line that up. So we have our reflections, and to finish them off and to make them a little bit more realistic, grab your brayer and on the very, very edge, right on that edge, ink up your brayer. And then you're going to roll a straight, well, as close to a straight line as you can. So you want to draw a line that is coming right across the middle of those reflections. And you can see that mine isn't perfectly straight, but it really just highlights that reflection. And then using up some of the weathered wood ink, I created some ripples in the water to really sort of highlight those reflections. So same thing, inking up right on the edge, not in the middle, right on the edge. And I should have inked off a little bit here, but that's okay. Just adding those ripples in to that water to create that realistic reflection. And oh, it looks so, I still love it. Looking back on it now, it's such a fantastic technique, and it's not perfect. There are things that I can improve upon always, but just have fun with it. Enjoy the getting to know a new technique, and it doesn't. No reflection is perfect. Remember that. So I just ink up the edges with the Chipped Sapphire just to help it stand out a little bit more, and then adding a sentiment stamp. And for that I used a birthday stamp from Fairy Hugs, one of our new companies that we are stocking in store. So, oh gosh, it's so beautiful. So have fun adding your sentiment and creating these cards. You'll see me as you go through the rest of this video create the exact same card. I ended up adding a little dragon, and I tried to use the graphite ink, the dye ink from Lavinia Stamps, which is beautifully black, however very inky. So my reflections were a little bit dark, but again, this was just me learning how to create this technique, and being very inky, the brayer didn't roll on smoothly, so probably being so dark I could have stamped off and then rolled the image on. But we live and we learn, we have fun, we enjoy learning new things, and I hope you have fun creating this technique and creating these beautiful cards. Remember, you can use any stamp set that you have. A small brayer works a lot better, I found, than my bigger brayer, but if all you have is a large brayer, that will work as well. Just make sure that you're sticking right to the edge and not using the full brayer. But have some fun with these, and we will see you at the end with 2 finished cards. We hope you enjoyed creating these reflection cards. They are just beautiful and so much fun. See you next time.